Hi everybody, and welcome back to this second lecture on IFRS 17, where we're talking about how profit emerges. And what we did in the first video was we figured out or came up with a kind of little example on what cash flows could look like under a very simple term assurance, under simplified assumptions. Then we looked at that same example in the last couple of videos when applying the logic that IFRS 17 requires. And so what we found is that for actuaries, you tend to have a big loss in the first year, followed by profits in subsequent years. But under IFRS 17, profit tends to emerge in each year and is perhaps more roughly evenly spread over time. That could be a bit different depending on this concept called transfer of services, but that's pretty much what we came up with. So what we're going to do in this video here is just finish off with a couple of additional notes on what we've done so far. So this section is additional notes. So my first point is a non-zero RA, or risk adjustment, remember that's in the balance sheet as well, may release into profit in a similar way to the CSM. Let's add a bracket, assuming risk is spread over the term in a, let's remove those words, assuming risk is spread over the term like transfer of services is. And you could expect that to be true. So where you've got more contracts in force, say near the start of the contract, there's more risk associated with having more contracts. And then later on in time, when lots of things have lapsed and there's less things in force, you could assume that to the company they're exposed to less risk. You could come up with other patterns. So depending on the risk, it could be the case that there's a significant risk all the way up until the end of the term, until everything goes off the books and ends. So maybe you could come up with a rationale for the RA being distributed in a different way to the CSM. But typically in my head, it seems natural that the RA would release pretty close to the way in which you release the CSM. You would end up with very similar logic, I would think. Okay. So my next point is about actual experience. If actual experience open bracket over the past 1 year, say, differs from expected experience then this difference is immediately released into profit or loss, open bracket, in addition to the above results. So, what does this mean? If you like, when we were talking about how the CSM releases gradually over time, we were implicitly assuming that the actual experience, the actual number of claims, say, that we get in each year is exactly the same as what we expected when we first set up that initial CSM at time zero. And of course, that may not be the case. So you could you could have a situation where, for instance, you have more claims than expected or less claims than expected. More claims than expected would be recognised immediately as an additional loss under IFRS 17. Less claims than expected would be recognised immediately as an additional profit. So this is for the particular year that you're working in when you're figuring out what the accounts are for that year or the accounts are for that quarter, for instance. My last point is about changes in assumptions rather than changes in experience, because of course as each year passes, actuaries might decide that actually they think what's going to happen in the future is a bit different to what they thought in the previous year, or say when the initial CSM was set up. So if actuarial assumptions for the future change, then this is handled by increasing or decreasing the CSM as appropriate. So yes, so if your actuarial assumptions change, then the amount of profit that you're locking up in the balance sheet that you're going to release later on may well change as well. And you could also imagine if your actuarial assumptions change, then your assessment of the risk adjustment could also change. So again, you would adapt that in the balance sheet. Okay, that's all I wanted to do to kind of finish off this kind of simple exploration of how that CSM releases into profit under IFRS 17. In the next lecture, we'll go into various other complexities that we may need to take into account, that it's worth us being aware of, even when we're kind of just trying to figure out a kind of a rough overall view of how this IFRS 17 thing works and compares to how we usually think about things as actuaries. So we'll talk about that in the next one.